Peter, pumpkin eater, had a wife. I'm J.L. Van Dyke, and welcome to the West is the Best show. Howdy, folks. We've got a pretty good show for you today. A lot of things to talk about. First, the tax cuts have finally passed. The God Emperor, Donald Trump, should be signing them into law today. Let's go to cut one, Mr. Producer. Let's have a look at the God Emperor. There he is. And we are already seeing companies, on the first day that this was passed by Congress, committed to reinvesting in America. That's a good thing. AT&T, a company that I actually hold some stock in, has been talking about how they're going to be giving their employees some bonuses and investing just billions of dollars in America, not overseas, not in Ireland, not in India. Maybe I'll actually get some decent customer support because AT&T is now my cell phone carrier. They have internet going to my house. I get DirecTV, which is now owned by AT&T. Now, maybe finally, if I ever need customer support, I'm not going to have to talk to somebody in India. And that's what I'd love to see. And what's also really good to see with these companies is that corporations are showing employees that what's good for the company is in their own best interest. The employees of these companies that are reinvesting and who are going to be getting bonuses because of the Trump tax cuts, they're going to remember this when it comes time to vote. And as we know, obviously we hope the God Emperor is going to serve a full 8 years as President of the United States, but it's very common for the pendulum to swing the other way. We're not going to have Republican presidents for the next 25 to 30 years. That would be nice, but historically, we know that's just not going to happen. And when the pendulum does swing the other way, I'm really hoping that companies like AT&T and Boeing not so much punish their employees, but they're going to show when Democrats want to raise taxes that that's going to cost some of them their jobs. It's not good for them to be liberal. It's not good for them to have people in the White House or in Congress that are putting forth socialist policies. So we eventually will have another Democrat Congress. We eventually will have another Democrat president. And I hope this trend of corporations, through the use of raises, hirings, and firings, continue to show employees that it's good for them to have conservatives, that capitalism is good, that social justice is bad. We don't need social justice, that tax cuts are in their best interest, and what is good for the companies they work for is in the best interest of the employees. Now, that having been said, there's been some bad news that we've heard lately. Kyle Chapman, bass stickman, is back in jail. I was looking at that this morning. Let's go to the next cut, Mr. Producer. Yeah, there's bass stickman Kyle Chapman, and he's a polarizing figure. Even people in my own chapter, there's some people that really like Kyle Chapman, some people not so much. I'm a fan. I've got to admit it. He's never done a wrong thing to me. I know some people in my chapter say that that's not the case, but I'm a Kyle Chapman fan, and what he's charged with out of California is supposedly possession of a billy club. I believe he's looking at something like 8 years in prison for this, and he had a bond hearing the other day. They've raised his bond to $400,000. And, of course, we're not hearing any outcry from the left over this. They love talking about the Eighth Amendment and cruel and unusual punishment when someone that murdered a bunch of kids is facing the death penalty. Oh, lethal injection is cruel and unusual punishment. But there's another part about excessive bail in the Constitution. And $400,000, that's the type of bail that I would expect if I was defending someone in the Metroplex charged with sexual assault of a child, someone charged with murder. And this is inappropriate, and the reason they want to increase the bail is because apparently he was arrested for driving around on a sand dune or something like that, and when he was arrested, they raised the bail because he was in possession of a device called a Kubaton on his keychain. Show the audience what a Kubaton is, Mr. Producer. Yes, this is a Kubaton. This is about a stick, basically. It's about 5.5 inches long. It'll go on your keychain. Now, let's be clear here. This is considered a weapon. When you go into a courthouse, if you have this on your keychain, you're probably not going to get arrested, but you're going to be ordered to take this back to your vehicle. And the same goes with the airports. You can't bring a Kubaton into the security area of an airport. There's websites and companies that offer Kubaton training, and what this particular device is used for is for hammer strikes to hit people with, particularly on pressure points. I don't own one, but it's apparently very effective. But that's what they're used for, and people are talking about Kubatons. The re-incarceration of bass stickman has had people talking about this and whether these things should be legal. And I say, you don't need to have a Kubaton. I don't own one. And the reason is because a Kubaton is a Kubaton, but a flashlight is a flashlight and a pen's a pen. Next cut, Mr. Producer. Now what we have there, this is a tactical pen that is sold by Smith & Wesson. And you look at that, if we could, you'll see that on the, yeah, there we go. You can see it's got a point on it. I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, yeah, that's probably intended to be used as a weapon. But then you get to other items. Let's look at the next thing. We have, yeah, we've got another pen. This is made by Smith & Wesson. You can see how that comes to a point. Yeah, it's pretty obvious what that's intended to do. Oh, yeah, you can say that's a pen. No, that's got a point on the end. That's made to jab people with. But let's look at what else we've got here. This is a flashlight. I like this flashlight right here. This is made by Streamlight. It's got a... They make very good quality flashlights. They're waterproof. They've got a momentary on function, which I really like because I teach people in firearms training to use flashlights while they're manipulating a pistol. This one is very small. It's easy enough to carry around. I don't have this particular model. This is my flashlight. It's a Streamlight. It's about the size of a stylus pen. It's actually called the stylus model, but you can still get a good grip on this thing and use it. It's not going to damage the flashlight. Still works to strike people with. And you can carry something like this. I've carried this in the courthouses. I've carried this through airports in my pockets. Sometimes I'll get a question from some underpaid, overworked security guy. What's this flashlight for? It's to see in the dark, jackass. Now let me through, and that's the end of it. See, there's another one. It's, I don't know who makes that one. I found this on the internet, but that's very much like the light that I have. And you hit someone with one of these things, it's really going to hurt. You can use these the same way as a Kubaton and really not be questioned for it. But obviously don't hit somebody with a flashlight because that'd be wrong. Next thing on the agenda to talk about today, the Bundy trial. Let's get a picture of the Bundys, Mr. Producer. Yes, that's some of the Bundy family. It looks like walking out of court. Another mistrial. This is the second or third mistrial in this case. I'm actually probably going to end up agreeing with Faghat Ken White about this, which I guess shows that even a broken watch is right twice a day. And the reason for the mistrial in this case is apparently the government withheld evidence. This isn't surprising to me at all, given that the prosecution of the Bundys began under the Obama administration. But there's going to be a hearing on January 8th before the same judge that declared a mistrial in this case as to whether the case is going to be dismissed with prejudice. Now, for those of you from Rio Linda, a case being dismissed with prejudice means that the government can't refile it. The case is over. It's functionally the same as though they were acquitted, like a jury found that they were not guilty. Now, I'm a big fan of the Bundys, but you should support dismissal with prejudice in this case, even if you're not a fan of the Bundys, because what's really scary to me about the fact that just now, the government has been found to have withheld evidence is, what if the Bundys had been convicted in the first trial? What that would have meant is if the Bundys had been convicted at their first trial, they would have been convicted without the government having disclosed to the defense team all the evidence that they were entitled to. And that's a real problem. Now, we don't know yet what kind of evidence this is. This could be Brady evidence, and if that's the case, the judge definitely needs to sanction the state somehow, and a dismissal with prejudice is a pretty good way to do that. But Brady evidence is evidence that tends to be exculpatory, evidence that could be used by the defense to show something that the jury would need to know to determine whether the state has met its burden of proof in proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. A really good example of Brady evidence that I see in my own practice is the disciplinary records of cops. Like, for example, the cop might have done everything absolutely right in the case, but if the cop had been disciplined, for example, for falsifying a police report in the past, that could be construed as Brady evidence that I'm entitled to. Government not handing that over is a problem. I've been wrongfully accused of things before. In fact, in the next show, I'm going to show a copy of all these bullshit bar grievances that faggots like Talib Kweli arranged for his little peons to have filed against me. You'll see what I'm going to do those next show. I think you're going to like it. But I'm going to be doing a show about that, and there needs to be a paper trail. The government needs to be disclosing exculpatory evidence. They need to be fulfilling their duty of disclosure to the defense team. So I'm glad that a mistrial's been declared, and we can only hope that this federal judge is going to do the right thing on January 8th and dismiss all the charges against the Bundys with prejudice. They'll be free, they can run their ranch, and this entire circus will be closed down. Speaking of false allegations, I want to talk a little bit about the Pence rule on this show. We have there we go. There's Vice President Pence. And what I found very humorous is, and I talked about this, I believe, in a social media post earlier this year when we talked about the Pence rule. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Pence rule is, the Pence rule is a personal guideline that Vice President Pence follows in his own life where he says, number one, he won't have a meal alone with any woman other than his wife. And number two, he will not attend an event where alcohol is served unless his wife is present. I'm currently writing an article about the Pence rule for West is the Best, and this is going to be a little bit of a preview of my article about the Pence rule, but I believe back on December 7th, another attorney named Roberta Kaplan, let's get a picture of Miss Kaplan, Mr. Producer. Yeah, that's Roberta Kaplan. Now, unlike some people, Roberta Kaplan is actually an attorney that is very good at her job. Miss Kaplan has argued cases in front of the Supreme Court before. I don't agree with her on anything politically, but unlike Ken White, I will at least concede that Roberta Kaplan is very good at her job. But she wrote a column for CNN which suggests that not only is the Pence rule a bad idea in the wake of all these allegations of sexual assault that I guess started with Harvey Weinstein, and now we've got all sorts of people losing their jobs over these sexual harassment and sexual assault claims, but she says that it's actually illegal. And the basis for her stating that the Pence rule is illegal is because it would mean that if men start following this rule, that women wouldn't get things that they're otherwise entitled to in the workplace, and I think that's absolutely wrong. But let me premise my opinion with this. First of all, with respect to a lot of these women making these sexual assault allegations, a lot of what they're saying, I think, is absolute bullshit. We were hearing about, I think it was Hillary Clinton, Hillary Rotten Clinton, her thyness, talked about how every woman has a right to be believed, except that they don't. And a perfect example of why a woman does not have a right to be believed whenever she opens her mouth about sexual harassment or sexual assault is the Duke lacrosse case. Now, I'll admit, I was one of the people with the Duke lacrosse case. When I heard those allegations, I thought, you know, regardless of some of the credibility problems with the victim witness that we knew about when it came out, they're probably guilty. And why did I think that? Well, because it's a lacrosse team and it's Duke University. And that was wrong of me to think that, and they ended up being completely innocent of the charges. The woman, the supposed victim in this case, completely made it up. But in these cases, it's a whole lot different because there's a few common factors in these new cases about sexual assault we're hearing about, and timing is a big one. And that brings me to Roy Moore. Let's get a picture of Roy Moore, Mr. Producer. We have Judge. There's Judge Moore. This was the worst case I think I've ever seen ever about a case where some women complain about sexual harassment or sexual assault, and I'm like, yeah, that's bullshit. These are Democrat operatives. What they're trying to do here is hurt Roy Moore and hurt the Republican Party at a time when they're very vulnerable. Roy Moore is a gentleman that has had a long career in Alabama politics. Most people know he was a justice of the Alabama Supreme Court before he ran for Senate. And it's not like the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court, you have the President of the United States appoints a justice to the Supreme Court, and then they are confirmed by the Senate. Roy Moore, and just like in Texas we elect justices to the Supreme Court, and the same thing is true in Alabama. He had something like a 30-year career in Alabama politics before these came out, but all of a sudden, Donald Trump is president, Roy Moore is running for the Senate, the primaries are over, we've had this campaign going for some time now, and right before the election, these women come forward with these allegations. I think they're bullshit. The timing doesn't add up. Now, just because they chose to time their allegations at this time doesn't mean that they're not true, but it makes them highly suspicious. Same thing with Bill O'Reilly. Nope, I don't believe a word about what those women have to say. As for Trump, we heard about the allegations of sexual assault against the God Emperor in October, right before the election. I didn't believe those then. I still don't believe them. We always talk about October surprises. I even remember when George W. Bush was first running for president, there was some allegation about a DWI or something he had that came out in October. I think Dan Rather did something about it. I really don't remember. That was a long time ago, but don't believe the timing on that one at all. Even Al Franken. Al Franken's a lib from Minnesota. I guess that kind of goes without saying that if he's from Minnesota, he'd be a lib. But I don't believe the allegations against Al Franken either. I've seen the groping pictures, but I think this is taken out of context. A lot of things being taken out of context these days, but Al Franken, you have to remember, before he became a senator, he was a comedian. He was a dirty comedian. I think he wrote a book called Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot and Other Observations. And he was on Saturday Night Live, and you know, they do crude things. This is what happens in comedy. No one would be surprised if it was Howard Stern, who was, I don't even think Howard's a liberal anymore. Let's say Howard was a liberal, and he was in the Senate, and someone came and said, oh, well, Howard Stern groped a guest on his show a couple years ago. Gee, you don't say. It's Howard Stern. And I think really the same thing is true about Al Franken. And I think to be intellectually honest here, we have to give Al Franken a pass. I believe when he says that some of these allegations are false. I believe him. I don't hold the fact that he's a liberal. I don't think that just because he's a liberal that he's lying. I believe Al Franken. And I think a lot of these women, what they want is attention, court settlements, and book deals. And because that's the climate in which we live in, that what the past several months have taught us is that women can get this attention, can get these book deals, can get on TV for making these allegations, that men in the workplace, they need to protect themselves. First of all, and I give this advice to my clients, I don't think alcohol should be served at company functions. There may be recovering alcoholics there, and I think companies should support the recovery of people who happen to be alcoholics. There are some people who don't drink for religious reasons, and I think that having alcohol at these company functions, especially in these times, is a big liability issue for the company. So I don't think they should have it. I mean, adults should be able to have a good time without drinking, and although I don't think it should be illegal for two people who are not related by blood or marriage to be alone together, I don't think it's really a good idea. You know, I was an Eagle Scout, and in the Boy Scouts of America, they have a rule that adult leaders can never be alone with another child that is not their son. They recognize the value of something very similar to the Pence rule, and the reason is because you need to have a witness. You need to be able to clear your name when people make false allegations. This is particularly true if you've got power and money. So, sorry, I don't care enough about women's rights to let any women, or man for that matter, put me in a position where I can be falsely accused of sexual misconduct. Now, of course, this is the point where snarky fuckheads like Asher Langdon come around and say, oh, he's going to probably see this and tweet, oh, well, you would never be accused of sexual misconduct because you're, what is an incel or something like that. I don't keep up on this jargon, but that's what I think about these groping allegations, and that's all the time we have for the day. So be looking for my article about groping that'll be coming out on West is the Best, and enjoy the tax cuts, and have a very Merry Christmas. Good night.